All right. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Carol Wick, and while we've got a lot of folks that are joining us this morning or this afternoon, I should say, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Sharity so we can get right into our webinar today. Welcome to session 2 in our winter series, which is all about maintaining health and wellness and leading with purpose and strength. And we're covering everything from the relationship with your board and rethinking what boards should actually look like and be like. Today's session is going to be about health and wellness. And then next month, we're doing a really exciting session on how to do succession planning and how to actually not only transition from founder to CEO, but how to take over as a CEO from a founder or longtime CEO. So if you've ever faced that challenge, which is very, very common, please join us next month. If you are registered today, you're already automatically registered for the 3-part series. So you'll be getting an invite for that. So with that part of our session today, we want to just tell you a little bit about Sharity and how and where we work. Our organization has a large team that spans the globe. We do work in 33 different countries right now and have a team that has expertise in everything from major gifts to business planning to mediation, and team building. So pretty much anything you could want, the Sharity team has an expert that can help you work with that problem. Just a little bit about our core services in case you are thinking about doing something in your nonprofit over the next year. We absolutely love to help organizations scale and grow and become sustainable. But we also have a particular passion for research, communication, and studying impact and developing outcomes. So I've got quite a few of those projects ongoing. And if you saw Philanthropy Today, yesterday, there was an article about the number one thing that that donors are looking for right now is transparency in outcomes, not transparency in financials. So it's actually a Bloomberg study that they had published. It's really fascinating and something that we specialize in. As I mentioned, next month, we're going to be talking about succession planning. But in the meantime, I am absolutely thrilled to introduce today's speakers and turn it over to our moderator, Ann Miskey. So Ann, turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Carol, and welcome everybody to today's webinar. It's wonderful to see all of your names, if not your faces, today. I'm really excited about today's session because it is so timely. Today, we're going to be talking about sustaining CEO or ED health and wellness. And of course, this is applicable to any of our senior leaders working in the not-for-profit sector. It gives me special pleasure to have our special guest with us today. Dr. Cassie Vaten is a clinical professor at the Department of Family Medicine Center for Integrative Health at the University of California, San Diego. She is the clinical professor and director of the Center for Mindfulness at the Centers for Integrative Health in the Department of Family Medicine at UC San Diego, the director of research at the Arthur C. Clarke Center for Human Imagination, and clinical psychology director at the Psychedelics and Health Research Initiative, again at UCSD. She's a senior advisor of the John W. Brick Mental Health Foundation, where she served as the executive director. So she's got the chops. She's been an executive director from 2019 to 2023 and a senior fellow at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, where she served as president from 2013 to 2019. So Cassie, welcome to today's session.
Hi, it's wonderful to be here.
So let's dive into today's topic. And Cassie, can you tell me what you are seeing or what you have seen in your work, both doing it yourself, but also in your work in psychology, with those leading nonprofits? And what are some of the situations you're seeing in terms of health and wellness of people?
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. And thank you, everyone, for being here. And thank you, Carol at Sharity. I love Sharity. And I just think they do such a good job. So it's a pleasure to be here. I mean, I'm sure that everyone on the call could tell many, many stories about the challenges and threats to well being for executive directors and CEOs and people on even chairs of nonprofit boards. We're all trying to do very good things in the world. And it comes from most often an internal drive and passion for a particular impact that we want to see happen in the world. And we're passionate. We would do anything to see that impact happen in the world. And as we move forward, we think that thing is going to be working directly on the issue. And as we rise in our organizations, what ends up happening is that we are no longer often working directly on the issue. We're working directly on budgets and insurance and lawsuits and fundraising and finance and budgets and board conflicts and Mary, who thought that that was her desk, but Susan said it was her desk. And now they're both very, very upset about it. I mean, it just goes on and on. And so what can happen is we say, okay, as soon as I get everything out of the way, then I'm going to be able to directly work on the issue. And then the bread rises in the oven. And then we say, well, okay, as soon as I get this bread out of the oven, then I'm going to be able to take care of myself better. Like I'm starting to notice that I'm getting tired. I'm starting to notice that I'm not sleeping. I'm not eating well. Maybe I'm drinking a little bit too much. Maybe I'm snapping at my partner or my kids. Maybe my heart rate is starting to change or my blood pressure is starting to change, my cholesterol. And over time, I think the tendency is to continually year after year say, okay, I just got to get this one more bread out of the oven and then I'll really be able to attend to my health and well-being. And then I'll really be able to do the direct work, which can lead to burnout and can lead to feeling pretty crispy. And it's important to know that burnout doesn't always mean that you don't care anymore. It often means that you care too much. And it doesn't always mean apathy. It can mean that you are so embroiled in, for lack of a better word, the drama, that you are on phone calls on your way to work, on your way home from work at 11 p.m. at night. You're in it so much. And it doesn't feel like you're burned out, but you are experiencing a form of burnout, which is the physiological and mental health consequences of an imbalance between the amount you're putting out and the amount you're filling your cup.
And I think this probably sounds really familiar to a lot of us here. And I think it's important to remember to your point, there are different ways you can feel, right? You can feel in that heightened state where you're anxious and stressed and uptight. And you can also be in that sort of low where just getting out of bed feels like the biggest thing ever. And both are signs, right, of that burnout. Now, Cassie, you talked about the fact that
I was just going to jump in if I could just
go
talk
ahead.
about this. I think the other thing that we're seeing is that it's not only just the anxious and the tired, but we're also seeing people with really serious health problems, with heart attacks and blood pressure problems. And I'm just on the phone earlier with a client who's been literally down with the flu for 3 weeks. It's just, you get to a point, I know I've been in and out of the ICU a few times myself, where your body just shuts down. And I think we're seeing that more and more now too. I just want to throw that out there. Sorry.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important point. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd add one more thing, which is anger and irritability. So I experienced a health breakdown as a CEO, as a organization CEO, and it manifested for a long time as anxiety and then depression and then irritability and anger. So one thing that you can really examine yourself and say, are you starting to have thoughts like, these people don't know what they're doing? If they just did their jobs, I would be able to. And, oh my, how could you bring, very irritable. And now looking back, I'm of course so embarrassed of, having that kind of a mood for a while and not respectful, but that's just the manifestation. So if you find yourself irritated a lot with your staff, with your board, what does Taylor Swift say? I'm the problem, it's me. It very much, it could be. And it's not even you. It's the demands of the job, it's the passion for the impact, and of course now it's the global and societal crisis that we're all experiencing, which is just adding an entire other layer of distress to what we're all trying to do here.
Absolutely. I think the fear, the uncertainty, none of us really know what's going to happen is extremely difficult. And, the other thing that I find is I learned very young as a CEO that your mood translates to your staff really quickly. So I've learned to sort of suck it up. But then I walk into my door at home, and guess who gets all of the frustration is my other half. And he's looking like, what just happened? So, something you mentioned, Cassie, and it's very true. People don't go into the not-for-profit world for fame and fortune, generally, right? We go into this work because we truly care. And we know at the end of the day that the work our organizations do can absolutely make a huge difference in people's lives. In some cases, it can be a matter of life or death for people. And that's a hard burden to bear. But I also want to touch a little bit on some of the psychology behind some of the way that we as leaders in the organization push ourselves. So yes, there's that compassion and that desire to do the right thing, to help and be there. But I would also suggest that there are some things that are maybe a little bit more negative that are behind some of this. And I don't know, Cassie, if you wanted to address a couple of those sort of philosophical issues that push us to these things.
Yeah, and I'd love to have people write into the chat too, because everybody can probably identify at one time or another with feeling, let's call it a savior complex. Like, I personally must save the world. I must save the organization. I must save the finances. It's my personal. Now, it's not that you're not responsible as a director, because you are responsible for a certain amount of deliverables and things like that. But it's a different feeling of, I personally must fix and save and solve this problem, rather than my job is to do the footwork towards implementing a strategy that we as an organization think could go a long way towards solving the problem. So you could see the difference between those things. I am part of a community. My responsibility is in part leadership of that community. And we're all working together to implement a strategy that we think might make a contribution to this problem, whether small or large. That's different than I personally am tasked with fixing everyone from my executive assistant to my board chair to the actual problem out in the world. That's a less adaptive way of approaching the work.
Yeah. And we really have to watch that, because it's easy to cross the line from caring and compassion to savior syndrome.
Yeah.
The other piece too, and this is something I think we got from the capitalist for-profit world, is this martyrdom syndrome of bragging on the fact that we worked 16 hours yesterday and I spent my entire weekend working. And we have to, I think, move away from that's something to be proud of, to say, okay, is this a one-time thing? It's a busy time of year, so it's all hands on deck. Or has this become the norm? And I take some sort of vicarious pride in the fact that I'm killing myself.
Yeah.
Again, you see this in the corporate world. We have to really watch that we don't fall into this trap. Instead, we should be going, why am I working 16-hour days and on the weekend? What's not working right? What's not happening? Do I not have other people that can take some of this, burden? Am I being particularly efficient in what I'm doing? So again, we need to stop bragging on how many hours overtime we work, and instead going, hey, I'm bragging over the fact that I got my work done and I went home at 5 o'clock and I had dinner with my significant other.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. I think it is something to be proud of to run a marathon once a year, or to, do a big push 2 or 3 times a year. I think that's great. When you really roll up your sleeves, especially when you invite everyone on the team to be a part of it, and you all pull off something miraculous together because you worked so hard, that's fantastic. But that's not a way of life. And we, one of the best things you can do in your organization immediately is to say, I don't expect anyone to return a phone call or a text or an email after 5 p.m. or after 6 p.m., whatever your thing is, even if I send it. And then if you can even discipline yourself to send it using the schedule send, which is send it tomorrow morning, not send it tonight, because it is hard for people to not respond when they get it, unless you're in one of those big pushes. And if you're in a big push, it's also okay to tell your team, we're going to be in a big push for the next 4 weeks. We are going to work more than I would consider balanced in this 4 weeks, but then we're going to take a lot of time afterwards to restore the balance. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's...
Oh, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead,
In
Carol.
the chat, we've got a couple comments, and Latanya said, I learned that no is a complete sentence.
Yes.
I love that.
It's so funny. You mentioned the sending emails after hours. When I first was hired at my first CEO job, I got a book, and it was exactly, it was, get this out. So now you're a CEO, now what? And the first thing it said was, do not send things after hours. Because even if you say, ignore this till tomorrow morning, you're the CEO.
Yeah.
People are going to do it. And it's very hard to retrain yourself to recognize that what you do, you can tell your people, look after yourself, be balanced, go home on time. And if they see you not doing that, guess what? They're going to do what you do, not what you say. And that's a really, really important leadership thing to learn, that you need to set a health and wellness example for your staff, not just for you, but for them as well.
You can even do some work on changing your language, which the words you use make a big difference in your own mind and brain, and they make a big difference for other people. So I remember when I was CEO of a 49-person nonprofit, and someone was taking a tour, and someone cracked open my office door and peeked in and said, "This is our CEO. She's really busy." And the person said hi, and they closed the door. And I thought, wow, is that what I want to be my main descriptor? To the extent that they don't even feel comfortable opening the door or bringing someone in to introduce them. And that's the environment I had created. And so I've tried since then to create space and to not even use the word busy. I don't use the B word. I say something along the lines of, I've filled my schedule to overflowing, and I'd love to meet with you next week. Now I want to just break down that sentence. I have filled my schedule. Nobody else did that. I did it. And it's overflowing. I admit it. I acknowledge it. And I would love to meet with you next week. I will make time for you. And so, banishing the B word and banishing the bragging. I think that's a really good point that you brought up, is that patting ourselves on the back for overworking really means that we haven't created a sustainable strategy in our organization.
And the other piece to that is, and I do think that in our not-for-profit sector, a lot of us go into this work. Yes, we care, absolutely, but also there's a need to be loved and appreciated. And I think that that kind of strange personal pleasure and feedback we get from letting the world know that we're killing ourselves. A lot of us, and I'm going to use myself as this, we get some personal satisfaction out of that. And I think that is also something we need to just really think about, is that a healthy way of being, that we need to kill ourselves to somehow feel like we're making a difference? No. The other piece to this is around leadership. And again, I was talking about what you do paints a picture for your staff. But are you of the feeling and the opinion that without you, everything is going to crumble? And, this is a common belief amongst a lot of us that if without me, the place will fall apart. Not usually going to happen. And Cassie, I don't know if you have any thoughts around that and how you kind of overcome that from a practical perspective, that view that if without me, we're in trouble.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as I mentioned, I had a personal health breakdown as a CEO. And I remember that the primary reason that I could not ask for help, even though my health was declining, was there is no possible way that I could take time off. It's not possible. And that was I believed it 100%. There's no way that I could take time off to improve my health. And there's no way that the budget would ever be able to accommodate bringing in another person. So what ended up happening is I did have the health breakdown. I talked to my CFO. They said, oh, yeah, you need to take 30 to 60 days off right now. So do it. Surprise, surprise. It is possible. And then when I got back, I said, you know what I really need is another person to come in and help me lead this. And they were like, okay, we'll find the money. I mean, it was, those two things were absolutely impossible in my mind. And they happened within 3 months. So, and it's not to have a fantasy. I know that if you have a small budget and you've got a 3-month runway until you run out of money, it's not always the case. But oddly enough, when you say this is no longer possible, somehow the organization will come through.
And
One of the things,
I also think that that sometimes not only do we think there's not enough money in the budget, but we'll do it for our staff, but they won't then do it for ourselves, even at the detriment of our agency, because our agency isn't thriving because we're not investing in ourselves as a CEO. And one of the most important things I heard from you, Anne, in a conversation a couple of months ago was how important it was for the CEO to invest in a personal coach and have that support and that person that they can talk to that is your sounding board, that's not your staff or your partner.
100%. And, along with that, because sometimes coaches can be expensive and all of that. But the other thing that I've done throughout my career is had CEO support groups. So I get other CEOs and we would meet once a month, usually for breakfast. And it was a great opportunity to both get ideas if you were struggling with something. Sometimes you just need to vent about that board member that's driving you insane or the staff person you don't know what to do with. It makes a huge difference to have that cone of silence conversation with people who truly understand what you're going through. So I would highly recommend both a coach and get yourself a support group. And other CEOs are really ideal because, again, they understand. One of the things I have said for years, and that, again, I have learned, is the sign of a good leader is if you were to disappear tomorrow, your organization would go on just fine. And that's really, really hard to accept that because we all want to think that we're indispensable. But that is good leadership. You are putting people in place that if I don't use the hit by a bus, I use the you win a lottery tomorrow and you're gone. Somebody's there to step in and somebody can take it on. And maybe there'll be some rough times and transition and they need to bring someone else in. If you leave and things fall apart, you're not doing your job. And that's a really important lesson for people to learn, right? You need to make sure that things are in place and people are in place. Also, your staff love the opportunity, right, of taking on a leadership role and letting them have it. So let's switch from sort of what's wrong and what's not working to what are some things leaders can do. We've talked about the coach. We've talked about the CEO support group. Cassie, do you have any suggestions as to what are some techniques and things that we can do?
Yeah, well, we've talked about semi-extreme versions, and I want to know, probably there's a few people on the call who were like, wow, that's a lot. But let's take it on like a lower or a medium level of distress and just beginning to maybe have some things that you're concerned about in terms of your health and well-being as an ED or a CEO or, among your staff, and how can you support them? And there's at the John W. Brick Mental Health Foundation, where I'm a senior advisor and I recently served as executive director, we created a model called the ecosystem of well-being. And I'm going to put it in the chat in just a few minutes. But what it entails is essentially a wheel of wellness with various spokes on the wheel, one of which is exercise, nutrition, sleep and rest, finding a way to connect with spirituality and meaning. Most of us don't have a problem with being of service or making a contribution in the world, but that's a good thing to be able to do. And sometimes you might notice that some of your staff members, they may be working for the big mission, but they don't actually get to engage in the big mission very much. They're more engaged in spreadsheets or, maybe they're whatever their job is. So you might want to give them more opportunity to actually experience the direct service part of the organization when you can. And, creating for yourself your own ecosystem of well-being, knowing that you can't do every single one of these things every single day, but if you could bring in a few of them every day and balance them out for a week, that's a really good thing to do, to say, my network, my framework for well-being for myself. And you can even, I'll give you a diagram that you can put up on your wall next to your desk and say, I need to hit at least 2 or 3 of these a week. Good exercise, great nutrition, great sleep, art, music, creativity, being outdoors, spending time in nature, letting the sunshine hit you, friendships and support, and whether it's a formal support group or just having people that you regularly hang out with, spirituality, meaning, and, saying, okay, that is part of my job duties. It's not outside of my job duties. These kinds of activities are part of my job duties. And you may think you don't have enough time for them, but as the director of the Center for Mindfulness, one of the things I recommend is that every hour you take about 5 to 10 minutes for a mindfulness practice. So that could be sitting quietly, observing your breathing and your body sensations. It could be doing a mindful walk or a mindful stretch. It could be smelling a flower. It could be anything. And people say, 5 to 10 minutes an hour, that's almost an hour a day. There's no way I could take that much time. But what I could guarantee you is that the remaining 55 minutes or 50 minutes of that hour will be twice as productive as your hour would have been without it. So it's, in a way, you can't afford not to do it.
Yeah, I love it. And it's so easy not to. I've started setting a timer on my phone just so it reminds me, because otherwise I plant my butt in the chair and I could be there for hours and never move. Now, I think these are all really, obviously really important, kind of what we do physically. What about some things that we can do at work to make some changes, not just in how sort of that personal wellness, but in terms of how we work differently to ensure this culture of wellness for ourselves and, again, our staff? Any suggestions, either Carol or Cassie, or if anybody else has some things, put them in the chat. What are some things that we could do that are more work related? Any ideas? I'll give an example. I'll start. When you're on vacation, do you turn your email off? Or are you checking your email all day? Right? So we had a culture in my last job where people would go on vacation and they'd be checking in every day and answering emails. And finally, I went to HR and I said, someone's on vacation, we turn off their email. We turn it off, and their staff is given instructions. They are not allowed to get in touch with that person. I was the only one that could get in touch with them. Only, and I had their text, so I could text them, but only if it was a case where that one person was the only person that could answer that question, and we had to have the answer for some legal issue, right? Other than that, nobody was allowed to be in touch with them, and their email was actively turned off. It took a little while of groans and complaints, and then to a person, my staff said they absolutely loved it, because when they were on vacation, they were on vacation. And again, I say to my staff, if there's nobody who can step into your role for a week or 2 weeks, You and I have to have a conversation about succession planning because you need to make sure there's someone else in your department that can step in. It's an opportunity for them and allows you to be free. So we changed the culture, and I started as a CEO. I started doing exactly the same thing. I knew that my senior staff knew how to get me. They had my phone number, but it became a culture of you're on vacation, you're on vacation. So those are some of the kinds of things that we can do to really create a culture at work of health and wellness. And the work is still getting done. We're not letting balls drop, but we're doing it in a way that is much healthier.
I'll
Now,
add to that, Anne, and
yeah,
that when my staff were sick, we had a rule, and I had to follow it too. But we had a rule that when you were sick, you went home and you stayed home, and you did not work from home sick. Then this whole idea that I'm so sick I can't come into the office, but I'm going to sit and I'm going to then do work, and I just put my foot down and said, no, if you're taking a sick day, you're actually taking a sick day, and you're not allowed to respond to emails. You're not allowed to be in meetings and calls. You need to be home and healing and repairing. And I think I just recently planned to be out of the country for 3 weeks this summer. And someone said to me, how can you do that as a business owner? And I said, because I have people who I trust implicitly to handle things while I'm gone. So even as a business owner, a team of 20, I got people who are really competent and can handle just about anything. And if they need me, they know how to get a hold of me. But that limiting that access, whether you're on vacation or, which is healing, health, mentally or physically healing because you're sick, I think is critical to set that culture and boundary.
100%. I think we learned a little bit of that through COVID, right? Where people used to come hacking and coughing, and they were, again, that martyrdom syndrome. I'm coming to work. And then it goes throughout the whole office. It's like, no, I don't want you here when you're sick. Sorry, Cassie, you were going to say something.
No, that's fine. Yeah. I mean, I think really getting imaginative about how you bring in these wellness kinds of practices into the workplace that don't take a lot of time and they don't interrupt the workday. So starting every meeting with a 60-second or 2-minute moment of silence or a small mindfulness practice. You can even rotate among the people who come to the meetings so that everyone at every level can bring something. And it could just be a breathing exercise. It could be sharing one word that describes how you feel or your intention for the meeting. It could be complete quiet that you just ring a bell after 1 minute or 2 minutes. But that sets the tone for every meeting, saying, okay, I'm letting you get present. I'm letting you wind down, down level your nervous system a little bit before we start talking about this. Staff meetings, you could take 5 or 10 minutes even for one person a month to do a who am I, which is where they come and talk about who they are, where were they born, where did they go to school, what were some of the interesting things that you don't know by just looking at them. And you, again, make sure to do it at every level so that you have everyone, including whoever's cleaning the floors, do this, And it's amazing. You will not believe who's in your organization. You've got somebody who's, sang opera. You have somebody who speaks 4 languages. You just never knew it. And so that can really increase the connection. You can have potlucks once a month where people bring a dish that reflects something about their heritage. I mean, there are just tons of different things that you can do that they sound like they could be frivolous or a waste of time, but the bonding that happens and the trust that's built, the sense of belonging that is built can be one of the most powerful health enhancers at your organization.
I had a staff person who let me know she'd worked for a circus and that she could walk on fire and swallow swords. And I said, what perfect prerequisites to work in a nonprofit. So it is, you find out things about people that bring you closer. I will also say vacation is another big one, and that's an American thing. Americans don't take vacation, and they're very proud of the fact that they've accrued weeks and weeks, and they can never let go and never take vacation. So it's another thing as a leader you can do is have those conversations with their staff and say, no, you need to take time off, and not 1 or 2 days here, but I think they say it's 2 weeks before you actually takes a week to depressurize and then a week of relaxation. So really encourage your staff to take off chunks of time. And again, leadership opportunities for your staff to make sure there are people trained and up to speed that can step in. And it's a wonderful way of developing your staff in ways that really make them feel good that you're going to trust them, that they can be in charge. So these are some things. When was the last time you had 2 weeks vacation? Again, it's not a culture we have here, and we can change that. We can and we should change that. We had some great ideas in my group. Does anybody else want to either share in the chat or quick comment just about something that they discussed that they could offer as an example of how to maintain wellness in your workplace?
Hi, this is Stacy Ellison, work for a nonprofit in Jacksonville, Florida. And one of the things that we as a leadership team have really worked on is those after hours communications. I work on the leadership team as a vice president. Our CEO is very much an after hours communicator, but we have decided as a leadership team that we would really work to limit and quite frankly, stop that type of after hours emailing and texting of our staff, because it is a trickle down effect, and we realized its effect on us and certainly didn't want to continue that to our staff as a whole.
Mm-hmm. And, I think that's a really important lesson. Thank you, Stacy, that it can be hard to be the one person to come out against these things. So where you can get a team, and I know our executive team, we created together team norms. How do we work together? How do we work? And it's much less threatening to put some things up when you're all adding things than to be the one person who goes to the boss and says, can you stop texting me at midnight? That's hard. So think about how do you to come together to develop some of those norms of how you work together in a wellness focused culture. Any other comments?
I know, Ellen, you mentioned working with the coach and blocking off time. You want to share that?
Yeah, that is, what I was saying is multiple people have access to my calendar as a convenience to me. So they're booking appointments and that sort of thing. But what I was finding is that my whole day was getting booked up. And so she recommended that I block time for specific projects, or even time that I need to research something or make phone calls to donors or whatever is more thoughtful and strategic and not reactionary. And that does relieve stress, because you feel like, okay, the time is not just flying away. I'm like doing something that is important.
I love that. Put focus time, whatever. I will say that everybody in my office has this. I don't know if you can see it. It says focus time, and you put it on your desk. We also have a don't disturb me time.
Oh.
So it's just a visible reminder if somebody's coming at my desk and they go, oh, she's in the middle of something that's really important. I know I can interrupt always. I say to my staff that, but otherwise I'll catch you later. So those little visual things, whether it's on your computer, on your bulletin board, on your desk, can also be helpful to us. We also had another one in our group that I thought was a really important idea, and that was about having someone trained. And I don't know if Stacy or LaTanya, either of you wanted to jump in about that. Put you on the spot.
No, that's
somebody else.
It's just that the blow dryer is going to be going. I'm getting my hair done, so I'm multitasking.
Yes,
I love
that.
So if you want to share on my behalf, I'm fine with that if you don't mind.
Sure. LaTanya talked about the importance of having someone else trained to do your job, who, she used the word, mirrors you. But one of the things that she pointed out, which is really important, is make sure that those people have the tools that they need. For example, if you go on vacation and you take all the passwords with you and nobody can get into that thing that they need to, And that's something we should all make sure that we actually have a succession plan. Succession can be scary, feels like you're going to get removed. But the idea, again, you win the lottery and you're gone tomorrow. Can somebody step in and go, okay, she left the notes, she left the passwords, here's all the accounts that we need, all of those people. That's something each one of us should do and have ready, because when you win the lottery, you're going to be out of there.
It's the next thing.
Right. I'm still waiting, by the way, for the lottery, but that's and Carol has put in the chat that Sharity has a wonderful succession planning document. So we'll share that the next time, but something that's really important to do. Any other thoughts before we move on?
Carol, if you'll let me share my screen, I was going to bring up this picture real quick.
Would be good.
Thank you. So this was the ecosystem of well-being that I brought up earlier from the John W. Brick Mental Health Foundation, and Carol did put the link in the chat. But it just includes body movement, exercise, eating well and nutrition, art, music, and creativity, giving yourself some time for that, sleep and deep rest, spirituality and meaning, being of service, friendships and support, nature and being outdoors, some kind of meditation, contemplation, prayer, breathing. And then at the top, we have crisis support, treatment, and counseling. And I just want to mention out loud that that's also a very viable coping strategy. It's completely 100% okay for you to have a therapist. It's even good for you if you're not in any kind of crisis to know who you would see if you needed to. Because if you ever do hit a crisis of mental health and well-being, it's the worst time to be searching around and trying to figure out what your insurance covers and who you might see. So you might in advance even put together like, here's my plan just in case something happens. But in general, all of these things, if you can maybe put this circle up on your wall and just kind of say, okay, which one of these do I want to do at my lunch hour today? Which one of these do I want to do tomorrow morning before I come into the office, intentionally to keep my mental health and resilience together? And again, seeing it as part of your duties, not as an extraneous, not as an extracurricular, but keeping yourself balanced, healthy, and well is actually part of your duties as a leader.
You know, Cassie, when I was working with a coach a few years back, one of the things that she told me was to list as a priority the things in my life, like family, work, personal time, spirituality, whatever it might be, to make a list of those things. And then over the next 2 weeks, she had me track how much time I spent on each one of those. And of course, the thing that I had ranked lowest was work. And I was spending more time at that than I was on the other things. And so really stepping back and prioritizing the amount of time. And then, as Ellen was saying, deliberately blocking time off for those things that I was saying was important, but I wasn't actually taking the time to do them, like connecting with my partner and spending one-on-one time with them, being out in nature. And if you don't deliberately block off that time for those things that are non-work related, we find that we just aren't doing them. And so making sure that if not only checking the things off, but physically blocking the time off in your calendar for those activities.
Yeah, in fact, at a more extreme level, one thing that I heard recently that blew my mind was never have a to-do list. It should all be on your calendar. So if you have anything on your to-do list that is not on your calendar, by definition, it means you don't have time to do that.
That's brilliant.
It's wild, actually. It is a huge change to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to be able to do that. It'll be the first week in May, because that's literally the next time I have time to dedicate that much time to this. And it really is a reality check instead of adding it to the to-do list. And what happens? Oh, I'm going to do it at 10 p.m. or I'm not going to get it done and disappoint people or whatever it is, right? So if you make your calendar your to-do list and the actual time is really nothing should be on your to-do list if it's not on your calendar, because it means you don't have time for it.
I love that. I love that. The other thing I would add is celebrate wellness. And again, not just have like a wellness day or whatever, but actually celebrate your staff for doing those kinds of things. And you can even hold meetings, whether it's with your executive team or depending how big your staff is, to sit down and say, okay, we're going to spend some time talking about when each of us is going to take some time off, and what do you need in place? How can we help and support you to take that time off? Let's get everything in place now. Have the conversations, actually recognize for people saying, you know what? Martha's been able to go home on time every day this month, and she's caught up on her work, and good for you, for your organization. These are the kinds of messages we need to be giving to people. Instead, we praise people killing themselves, and we got to stop that. We got to support and help them when they need it. But we also want people to go, no, it is a good thing that you're looking after yourself. You're a valuable employee because you're taking care of yourself. So, have those conversations. And again, live the way you want. Do what I do, not what I say, because we're notorious at that in leadership.
And
any
a
other?
couple other, oh, go ahead.
No, Cassie, you go ahead.
Oh, just a couple other good ones, I think, are if you're still having hour-long meetings on Zoom, make them 45 minutes. And I guarantee you will get the same amount done, if not more, in the 45 minutes. And then take the 15 minutes to stretch, to do 10 squats, to go use the restroom, to get a giant glass of water. I mean, 45 minutes is plenty. And the more efficient people need to be, oddly, the more they are efficient. So do that. And another thing I think was really helpful is to try to role model some of these things. So the whole time I spent being a nonprofit CEO, I was the mother of a young child who grew up I was a CEO, 10 years. So she was growing up most of that time. And I would stop any meeting if she called. If I was not on stage or on a live broadcast or, something along those lines, I would always pick up the phone, even if it was, I'm here, I'll call you back at the end of this. And what I would say to people would be, my daughter's calling. I always pick up the phone when my daughter calls. And I remember meeting with a woman who was like, I didn't know we could do that. It's just, I didn't even know that was allowed, and it's like, yeah, you can make rules like that for yourself and be a role model to others.
Yeah. Always talk about your family comes first. And if your 6-year-old has a grade 1 thing, yes, you're supposed to go to that. That's where it's at. I had a boss years ago who would not let me work full days when I came back from vacation, because he said, you're going to undo all the good. So you can only come back for half days for the first week after vacation. I've never been able to implement that, but I always remembered that as, okay, he was looking after us. Any final comments, Carol, Cassie, or anything there's some great comments in the chat. Just some final words that you'd like to say to these amazing people here. Carol.
Cassie? Oh, Carol. Okay. Well, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, having been through this as a CEO, but also seeing so many of our clients facing health crises. And so hopefully there's something that you're walking away with today that is helpful. And I just also want to very quickly encourage you to look at the other webinars that we've done recently and join us on the next webinar coming up, because I think what we're trying to do is tackle some of those really big pressing issues that really don't get talked about much. And say thank you so much for being with us today. It's always a joy.
Thank you. Cassie, any final words?
Oh, I would just say put that taking care of yourself at the top of your list, and it can be very small. We've talked a lot about vacations and some more idealistic things that would be tricky to pull off, but that 5 minutes every hour, the small things make a huge, huge difference.
Wonderful. Well, Cassie, thank you so much for joining us and for your words of wisdom today. Carol, always, and for all of you wonderful people, please be well. and look after yourselves. It's a stressful time right now for everybody in the not-for-profit world, but remember, stick together, build community, and look after yourselves. So go and be healthy, everybody.